I returned home early to surprise my wife. The new maid refused to open the gate. "Madam is at the pool with her husband." I said, "I am the husband." She scoffed. "The boss has been here for hours." I looked through the fence and saw the personal trainer. I didn't scream. I decided to play the delivery guy. I handed them an envelope that made the couple run down the street in their towels. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Roger, and at 62 years old, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Holly, after 35 years of marriage. I thought I understood the rhythm of our life together, the comfortable predictability of our routines, the quiet trust that had carried us through decades of shared mornings and whispered good nights. I was wrong about everything. It was a Tuesday in late September when my world cracked open like an egg hitting concrete. I had left the office early that day, feeling lighter than I had in months. My business partner had just closed a deal that would secure our small consulting firm for another year, and I wanted to surprise Holly with the good news. Maybe take her out to dinner at that little Italian place on Main Street where we used to go when we were young and thought love was enough to solve everything. The afternoon sun painted our street in golden hues as I pulled into our driveway on Maple Street. Our house, a white colonial that we had bought 28 years ago when Holly was pregnant with hopes we never got to see fulfilled, looked exactly the same as always. The hedges were trimmed, the lawn was pristine, and everything appeared normal. But normal, I was about to learn, was just an illusion I had been living in for months. I parked behind Holly's silver Honda and noticed an unfamiliar red pickup truck parked across the street. Nothing unusual about that. Our neighborhood had its share of contractors and service workers coming and going. I grabbed my briefcase and walked toward the front door, already imagining Holly's surprised smile when I told her about coming home early. That's when I met Maria. She appeared at our wrought iron gate like a guardian blocking my path. Her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her uniform crisp and professional. I had never seen her before, which struck me as odd since Holly usually introduced me to any new help she hired. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice polite but firm as she positioned herself between me and my own front door. "Mrs. Holloway is busy right now." I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" "The senora is at the pool with her husband," Maria explained, as if this should make perfect sense to me. She asked not to be disturbed. Something cold settled in my stomach. "Her husband," I repeated slowly, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Maria nodded earnestly. "Yes, sir, the boss has been here for hours. Very important meeting," she said. I stared at this woman, who was treating me like a stranger at my own home. "I am her husband," I said, my voice steady despite the growing unease in my chest. "I'm Roger. This is my house." Maria's face shifted into something between confusion and amusement. She actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound that hit me like a slap. "No, no, senor. The husband is already here. Tall, strong man with dark hair. Very handsome." She gestured toward the back of the house. "He comes here every Tuesday and Thursday for the special swimming lessons." Special swimming lessons. The phrase echoed in my head as I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Holly had mentioned something about working with a personal trainer, improving her fitness routine. She had talked about swimming more, getting back in shape, taking better care of herself. I had encouraged it, proud of her commitment to health at 60 years old. "Maria," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice calm while my heart hammered against my ribs. "I need you to let me through. This is my house. I live here." She looked me up and down, taking in my gray slacks, my button-down shirt, my thinning hair and lined face. When she looked back at my eyes, there was pity there. Pity for the confused old man who was clearly delusional. "Sir, I think maybe you are confused. The boss, he is much younger, very fit. He drives the red truck." She pointed toward the street where that unfamiliar pickup was parked. the red truck. Everything was starting to make a sickening kind of sense. "How long have you been working here?" I asked. 3 weeks, Maria said proudly. "Mrs. Holloway hired me special for when the boss comes for swimming. Very important that they have privacy for the training." Privacy for the training. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling 35 years of trust and love crumbling like old concrete. When I opened them again, Maria was watching me with growing concern. "Sir, are you okay? You look very pale." I nodded slowly, though nothing about this moment was okay. "Maria, I need you to step aside. Now." Something in my voice must have convinced her, because she hesitated and took a small step back, but instead of going to the front door, I walked around to the side of the house where the tall wooden fence enclosed our backyard, the fence that provided privacy for Holly's garden, for our weekend barbecues, for quiet evening conversations under the stars, for whatever was happening right now. I found a gap between two fence boards where the wood had warped slightly over the years. I had been meaning to fix it for months, but never got around to it. Now I was grateful for my procrastination as I pressed my eye to the opening. The scene that unfolded before me will be burned into my memory until the day I die. There was Holly, my wife of 35 years, in a red bikini I had never seen before. She was laughing in a way I had not heard in years, light, carefree, genuinely happy. Her hair was styled differently, younger somehow, and her skin glowed in the afternoon sun. And there was the man Maria had called the boss. He was indeed tall, muscular, with thick dark hair and the kind of confident posture that comes with youth and physical strength. He couldn't have been more than 40, maybe younger. His name was Jake, I would later learn, Jake Morrison, 28 years old, certified personal trainer and predator of lonely wives. I watched as Holly playfully splashed water at him, watched as he caught her hand and pulled her closer. I watched as they kissed, not the brief, perfunctory kisses that Holly and I had exchanged for years, but the deep, hungry kind of kiss that speaks of passion and secrets and promises made in whispered moments. I watched as my wife touched this stranger's face with tenderness I had forgotten she possessed. I watched as she threw her head back and laughed at something he whispered in her ear, the sound carrying across the water like a knife through my chest. I watched as they moved together in the pool, their bodies intertwined in a way that spoke of familiarity, of practiced intimacy, of something that had been happening for far longer than 3 weeks. My legs felt weak, and I had to grip the fence to keep from falling. This wasn't a moment of weakness, a single mistake that could be forgiven and forgotten. This was a relationship. This was Holly, living an entire life I knew nothing about, with a man who was younger than some of the friendships we had cultivated together. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by the destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed to have stopped, leaving me suspended in this moment of awful clarity. Finally, I forced myself to step away from the fence. My hands were shaking as I walked back around the house, past Maria, who was now watering the front flower beds and humming softly to herself. She looked up as I passed. "You find what you were looking for, sir?" I met her eyes, and for a moment I saw understanding there. She knew, of course she knew. Holly had hired her specifically to keep people like me, people like the real husband, from disturbing her afternoons with Jake. "Yes," I said quietly. "I found exactly what I was looking for." I got back in my car and drove away from my house, away from my life, away from 35 years of what I had thought was love, but was apparently just habit and convenience. I drove with no destination in mind, just needing to move, needing to process what I had seen. As I sat at a red light 3 blocks from home, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Holly. "Working late at the gym again. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at those 3 words, "love you," and felt something inside me die. Not just love, but the naive belief that the people closest to us are incapable of such casual cruelty. She was texting me lies while Jake's hands were still wet from touching her skin. That's when I knew I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg for explanations. I was going to do something far more devastating than that. I was going to think. I drove for 2 hours that day, meandering through neighborhoods I barely recognized, past strip malls and coffee shops, and the ordinary lives of people who still believed their spouses came home to them each night. When I finally returned to our house on Maple Street, Jake's red pickup was gone and Holly was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing had changed. She looked up when I walked in, her face bright with what I now recognized as the glow of someone who had spent the afternoon being desired. "You're home late," she said, stirring something that smelled like the beef stew she used to make when we were young. "How was work?" I studied her face, looking for some sign of guilt or nervousness, some crack in the performance. There was nothing. 35 years of marriage had taught her exactly how to lie to me. "Fine," I said, setting my briefcase on the counter. "Same as always." She nodded, already losing interest in the conversation. This, I realized, was how it had been for months. Holly, going through the motions of being a wife while her mind was somewhere else entirely. With someone else entirely. "I started that new fitness routine I told you about," she said casually, not meeting my eyes. "The personal trainer is really pushing me. I'm exhausted." The personal trainer. I wanted to laugh at the euphemism, but instead I just nodded. "That's good. You seem happier lately." She paused in her stirring for just a moment, so briefly I almost missed it. "Do I? Well, exercise is good for the mood, they say." Exercise. I watched her move around the kitchen, this woman I had shared a bed with for over 3 decades, and marveled at how easily the lies flowed. How long had she been practicing this performance? How many conversations had we had where she was thinking about Jake's hands on her skin while discussing groceries and bills and the weather? That night, I lay in bed, listening to Holly breathe beside me. Her body turned away from mine as it had been for months. I had attributed her distance to menopause, to the natural evolution of a long marriage, to the comfortable transition from passion to companionship. I had been such a fool. I didn't sleep. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and made lists in my mind. Everything I needed to know, everything I needed to do, every detail that would matter when the time came to act. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. Holly seemed surprised but not concerned. "I hope you're not coming down with something," she said, adjusting her hair in the hallway mirror. She was dressed for the gym in expensive workout clothes I didn't remember her buying. "I have my training session this afternoon, so I probably won't be back until evening." Training session. The words felt like salt in a wound. "Take your time," I told her. "Get a good workout." After she left, I sat in my home office and did something I never thought I would do in my entire life. I looked up private investigators in our area. The man I eventually hired was named David Chen. He was professional, discreet, and expensive, $3,000 for what he delicately called a comprehensive matrimonial investigation. I met him at a coffee shop downtown, away from any place where Holly and I might be recognized together. "How long has this been going on?" David asked after I explained the situation. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think longer than I want to believe." David nodded with the weary understanding of someone who had seen this story play out countless times. "Most people wait too long to call me. They see the signs but hope they're wrong. You're actually moving faster than most." Faster. The word stung because it implied I had been slow to recognize what was happening in my own marriage. How many Tuesday and Thursday afternoons had Holly been with Jake while I worked late at the office, proud of my wife for taking care of her health? "What exactly do you need to know?" David asked. "Everything," I said. "How long it's been happening, how serious it is, whether—" I paused, the words sticking in my throat like glass. "Whether she's planning to leave me?" David made notes in a small leather journal. "Most of my clients want evidence for divorce proceedings. Is that your goal here?" I considered the question. Was it? I honestly didn't know yet. All I knew was that I couldn't move forward, in any direction, without understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. I just need the truth, I told him. The truth, as it turned out, was worse than I had imagined. David called me 3 days later with a preliminary report. We met at the same coffee shop, and he slid a manila folder across the table to me like we were conducting some kind of spy transaction. "Your wife has been seeing Jake Morrison for approximately 4 months," he began without preamble. "It started in June when she hired him as a personal trainer through Elite Fitness. The relationship became sexual within 2 weeks." 4 months. I opened the folder and found photographs that made my stomach clench. Holly and Jake leaving a hotel on the other side of town. Holly and Jake having lunch at a restaurant I had never heard of. Holly and Jake shopping together at a mall 30 minutes away from our house, far enough that they wouldn't run into anyone we knew. "There's more," David continued quietly. "She's been using a credit card you probably don't know about to pay for hotel rooms, dinners, gifts for him. She spent approximately $8,000 in the past 4 months. $8,000. Money from our joint account that I had assumed was going toward her gym membership and healthy eating. Money I had been happy to see her spend on herself because I thought it meant she was taking care of her health." "They meet twice a week," David said, "always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sometimes at your house when you're at work, sometimes at his apartment, sometimes at hotels. She tells him details about your marriage, your finances, your routines." My fingers tightened on the folder. "What kind of details?" David's expression grew uncomfortable. "Mr. Holloway, this might not be something you want to hear. Tell me." "She's told him about your retirement accounts, your life insurance policy, the value of your house." David paused. "She's also told him that you've been talking about updating your will." The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I barely noticed. "Why would she tell him about my will?" David leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "Mr. Holloway, I've been doing this for 15 years. When a spouse starts discussing inheritances and life insurance with their affair partner, it usually means one of 2 things. Either they're planning to leave the marriage and want to know what they'll walk away with, or they're planning to wait for the marriage to end in a different way." The implications of his words hit me like a physical blow. Holly wasn't just having an affair. She was calculating, planning, waiting. "There's something else," David said, pulling out another photograph. "This was taken yesterday." The image showed Holly and Jake in what appeared to be a jewelry store. Jake was pointing to something in a display case while Holly nodded eagerly beside him. "We couldn't hear the conversation," David said, "but the body language suggests they're making plans, long-term plans." I stared at the photograph until the faces blurred. Holly was looking at Jake with the same expression she had worn when we picked out our engagement ring 40 years ago, excited, hopeful, in love. "How much do I owe you for this?" I asked, closing the folder. "You paid the retainer. This completes the basic investigation." David studied my face. "But Mr. Holloway, if you're planning to confront your wife with this information, I'd strongly recommend speaking with a divorce attorney first. Protect yourself legally before you make any moves." A divorce attorney. The phrase felt surreal. 3 days ago, I had been a married man planning to surprise his wife with good news from work. Now I was discussing legal protection from the woman I had loved for most of my adult life. "I'll think about it," I told David. But as I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat beside me, I knew I wasn't going to think about anything. I was going to act. That evening, Holly came home glowing again, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. She had started wearing perfume again, something light and expensive that I didn't recognize. "Great workout today," she announced, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably kissed Jake goodbye an hour earlier. "I think this new routine is really paying off." "You look wonderful," I said, and meant it. She did look wonderful, alive and vibrant in a way she hadn't in years. The irony was devastating. "I'm thinking about increasing my sessions," she said, opening the refrigerator. "Maybe 3 times a week instead of 2. Jake thinks I'm ready for more advanced training." Jake thinks. I wondered how many conversations Holly and I had had in the past 4 months where she had quoted Jake's opinions to me. How many times had she used my own trust against me? sharing intimate details of our life with her lover while I nodded and smiled and encouraged her newfound happiness. "Whatever makes you happy," I told her. She smiled at me then, a genuine warm smile that reminded me of why I had fallen in love with her so many years ago. That smile hurt more than all of David's photographs combined because it meant that Holly was capable of feeling joy and love and contentment. She just felt those things for someone else now. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront Holly. I wasn't going to beg or plead or ask her to choose between Jake and me. I already knew who she would choose, and I refused to humiliate myself by asking the question. Instead, I was going to give Holly exactly what she wanted, but on my terms. I was going to set her free in a way she would never forget. The following week, I became a man I didn't recognize. During the day, I maintained my routine, going to work, responding to emails, attending meetings as if my life wasn't disintegrating. But underneath the surface, I was conducting my own investigation, piece by piece, like assembling a puzzle I desperately didn't want to complete. I started paying attention to details I had ignored for months. The way Holly's phone was always face down on the table, how she had suddenly become interested in taking longer showers, sometimes twice a day. The fact that she had started doing laundry more frequently, washing clothes I never saw her wear around me. On Thursday morning, Holly announced she was going shopping after her training session and wouldn't be home until evening. The casual way she delivered this information, as if she were discussing plans to visit the grocery store, made my stomach turn. "Take your time," I told her, kissing her goodbye like I had done thousands of times before. Her perfume smelled different again. Everything about her seemed designed for someone else's appreciation. An hour after she left, I did something that would have been unthinkable to me just a week earlier. I searched through her belongings. I started with her dresser, methodically going through drawers I had respected as private for 35 years. In the back of her jewelry box, underneath the earrings I had given her for our last anniversary, I found a receipt from Victoria's Secret. $467 for lingerie I had never seen her wear. My hands trembled as I unfolded the receipt. The date was from 3 months ago. Early July, just weeks after her affair with Jake had begun, according to David's timeline. The itemized list read like a catalog of seduction: silk negligées, lace sets, perfume, body lotion, none of it purchased for me. I sat on the edge of our bed, surrounded by the evidence of Holly's double life, and felt something inside me crystallize. This wasn't just an affair. This was a complete reimagining of herself for another man. She had become someone new, someone exciting and desirable, but only when she was away from me. In her nightstand drawer, I found a small leather journal I had never seen before. My conscience warred with my need to know the truth, but the truth won. I opened it to find pages of Holly's handwriting, documenting her relationship with Jake in excruciating detail. The entries started in June. "Jake makes me feel alive again. When he looks at me, I remember what it's like to be desired, not just tolerated." July. "He says Roger seems like a good man, but boring. He can't understand how someone my age ended up with someone so old and set in his ways. Neither can I, honestly." August. "Jake asked about the house today. He was surprised to learn it's worth so much. We talked about what it would be like to travel together, to see the world without having to worry about Roger's careful budgets and retirement planning." September. I found myself looking at Roger this morning and feeling nothing but pity. He has no idea how much life he has left to live, but he's already given up. Jake would never give up like that. Each entry was a dagger through whatever remained of my heart, but it was the most recent entry, dated just 3 days ago, that made my blood run cold. Jake brought up something interesting today. He said he knows people who have been in situations like ours before. Older woman, younger man, complicated marriage. He said sometimes these things resolve themselves naturally if you're patient enough. I asked what he meant, and he just smiled and said that sometimes life has a way of opening doors when you least expect it. I read that entry 3 times, the implications becoming clearer and more terrifying with each reading. Resolve themselves naturally. Life has a way of opening doors. The euphemisms were thin veils over something much darker. I closed the journal and sat in the silence of our bedroom, trying to process what I had discovered. Holly wasn't just planning to leave me. She and Jake were discussing scenarios where leaving wouldn't be necessary, where the marriage would end in a way that would leave her free but financially secure. My phone rang, interrupting my dark thoughts. It was David Chen. "Mr. Holloway, I need to see you immediately." His voice was urgent in a way that made my stomach drop. "There have been some developments." We met at a small diner 40 minutes away from our house. David arrived carrying a larger folder than before, his expression grim. "I continued surveillance as you requested," he began without preamble. "What I discovered goes beyond a simple affair." He opened the folder and spread out a series of photographs. Holly and Jake at what appeared to be a financial planning office. Holly signing documents while Jake watched. Holly and Jake meeting with a man in an expensive suit outside a law firm. "Your wife has been meeting with financial advisors and attorneys," David said quietly, "without your knowledge." I stared at the photographs, my mouth dry. What kind of meetings? "Based on what we could observe and some discreet inquiries, she's been exploring her options regarding asset division in the event of divorce, but that's not the concerning part." David pulled out another set of photos. These showed Holly and Jake with a different man, someone who looked less professional, more predatory. "This man is Tommy Ricci. He has a history of insurance fraud and has been involved in several suspicious death claims over the past decade. Nothing proven, but enough of a pattern to raise red flags." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your wife and her boyfriend have been asking questions about your life insurance policy, specifically about how quickly claims are paid out and whether there are any exclusions for accidental death." I felt bile rise in my throat. "You think they're planning to kill me?" David leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I think they're exploring all their options, and one of those options involves you having an accident that would leave your wife a very wealthy widow." The photographs blurred in front of me as the full scope of Holly's betrayal became clear. This wasn't just about sex or loneliness or the excitement of a younger man. This was about money, about freedom, about starting over without the inconvenience of divorce proceedings or asset division. "How much is my life insurance policy worth?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "According to public records, $1.2 million, double indemnity for accidental death. $2.4 million, enough for Holly and Jake to disappear together to start fresh somewhere warm and expensive, enough to make murder seem like a reasonable investment." "What do you recommend?" I asked. David studied my face carefully. "Honestly, I recommend you go to the police. What we have here suggests conspiracy to commit murder. Even if they haven't acted yet, planning it is a crime." I considered this option, imagining the humiliation of explaining to strangers that my wife of 35 years was planning to have me killed for insurance money. The media attention, the public exposure, the destruction of whatever dignity I had left. "No," I said, firmly. "No police? Then what do you want to do?" I was quiet for a long moment, an idea forming in my mind. A plan that would give Holly exactly what she wanted, but not in the way she expected. "I want you to document everything," I told David. "Every meeting, every conversation you can record, every plan they make. I want evidence of all of it." And then, I smiled for the first time in weeks, though it felt more like baring my teeth. "Then I'm going to deliver some very important documents to my wife." David raised an eyebrow. "What kind of documents?" "Divorce papers," I said, "but not the kind she's expecting." Over the next week, while Holly continued her charade of marriage counseling and Jake continued his role as concerned personal trainer, I met with the best divorce attorney in the state. Margaret Williams had handled high-profile divorces for 23 years and had a reputation for protecting her clients' assets with ruthless efficiency. When I explained my situation and showed her David's evidence, Margaret's eyes lit up with professional interest. "This is actually quite straightforward," she said, reviewing the photographs and recordings. "Your wife's affair, combined with evidence of financial planning that excluded you and potential conspiracy against your life, gives us extraordinary leverage." I want to keep everything, I told her. The house, the retirement accounts, the investments, everything. Margaret nodded. Given the circumstances, that's entirely possible. The adultery alone would be sufficient, but the insurance investigation angle, that changes everything. She leaned back in her leather chair, studying me carefully. How do you want to serve her? I had been thinking about this question for days. I could have Holly served at home, privately, allowing her to maintain some dignity. I could have her served at the gym, creating a scene but limiting the audience, or... I want to deliver them myself, I said. Margaret looked surprised. That's unusual. Most people prefer to avoid the confrontation. I don't want to avoid it, I said. I want to control it. The papers were prepared within 3 days. Margaret had included everything: adultery charges, financial misconduct, alienation of affection, and a detailed accounting of Holly's expenditures on her affair. The settlement terms were stark. Holly would receive nothing beyond what the law absolutely required, which in our case was almost nothing given the circumstances. But the real surprise was the final page, a document that would destroy Holly's plans more completely than any divorce could. A life insurance policy cancellation, filed that morning and effective immediately. If Holly and Jake were planning to wait for my convenient death, they were going to be waiting for nothing. The following Tuesday, I called in sick to work again. Holly left for her training session with Jake, humming softly and completely oblivious to the fact that her entire world was about to collapse. I spent the morning preparing for what would either be the most satisfying moment of my life or the most terrifying. Either way, it would be the most honest moment Holly and I had shared in months. I put on my best suit, the navy one Holly had bought me for our 30th anniversary. I wanted to look like a man who was in control, not a victim who had been betrayed and discarded. Then I drove to a uniform rental shop and picked up the delivery driver costume I had ordered. The plan was simple, elegant, and completely devastating. I was going to deliver the truth to Holly and Jake while they were enjoying their afternoon of lies. And I was going to watch their faces when they realized that sometimes the prey knows exactly what the predators are planning. At exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, I parked my car 3 blocks away from our house and walked back carrying a brown envelope and wearing the uniform of Metro Express delivery service. The navy blue shirt and matching cap transformed me into just another working man making his rounds through suburban neighborhoods. The disguise was perfect. Even Holly wouldn't look twice at a delivery driver. My heart pounded as I approached our front gate, but my hands were steady. I had spent too many sleepless nights planning this moment to let nerves ruin it now. Through the gaps in our fence, I could hear the sounds I had become sickeningly familiar with. Holly's laughter mixing with Jake's deeper voice, the splash of water in our pool, the clink of glasses as they shared drinks in the middle of the day while I was supposed to be working. I pressed the doorbell and waited. The sounds from the backyard stopped abruptly. "Maria!" Holly's voice called out, sharp with irritation. "Can you get that? We're not expecting anyone." I heard Maria's footsteps approaching, and a moment later the front door opened. She looked at me with the same polite efficiency she had shown the week before, though I could see a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Delivery for Mrs. Holly Holloway," I said, keeping my voice pitched differently than she would remember. "Signature required." Maria took the envelope and examined it. "What company is this from?" "Legal documents," I said simply. "Very important that Mrs. Holloway receives them immediately." Something in my tone must have convinced her because she nodded and headed toward the backyard. I followed at a discreet distance, my pulse racing as we approached the scene of my own domestic destruction. Holly was lounging on a pool float in her red bikini, a large glass of wine balanced on a side table within arm's reach. Jake was in the water beside her, his hand resting possessively on her leg. They looked like a magazine advertisement for an expensive resort, all tan skin and easy luxury. When they saw Maria approaching with a stranger behind her, their entire dynamic shifted. Holly's expression went from relaxed contentment to sharp alertness in less than a second. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who was used to being in control of her environment. "Delivery for you, ma'am," I said, holding out the envelope. "Needs your signature." Holly frowned, sliding off the float and wrapping a towel around herself. I wasn't expecting anything. What kind of delivery? Legal documents, I repeated, from the law firm of Williams, Patterson and Associates. The name hit Holly like a physical blow. I saw her face pale beneath her tan as she processed what this might mean. Margaret Williams had a reputation in our social circle. She was the lawyer wealthy women hired when they wanted to destroy their husbands in divorce proceedings. I don't understand, Holly said, but she was already reaching for the envelope with trembling fingers. Jake had climbed out of the pool and was standing beside Holly now, water dripping from his muscled frame as he tried to read the expression on her face. "What's wrong, babe? What is it?" The casual endearment, babe, spoken in front of Maria and a stranger, confirmed everything I needed to know about how public their relationship had become. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Holly tore open the envelope and pulled out the thick stack of papers inside. As she read the first page, her face went through a series of expressions that would be burned into my memory forever: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally pure terror. "This can't be right," she whispered. Jake moved closer, trying to read over her shoulder. "What is it? What can't be right?" Holly's hands were shaking so badly now that the papers rustled like leaves in a storm. It's divorce papers. Roger is divorcing me." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Jake's expression shifted from concern to calculation as he processed this information. "How did he find out?" Jake asked, and I noticed he didn't ask if the accusations were true or express any remorse about breaking up a marriage. He just wanted to know how his plan had been discovered. Holly was scanning through the pages now, her breathing becoming more rapid as she read the detailed accusations. "He knows everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The hotels, the credit cards, the meetings with—" She stopped reading abruptly, her face going white. "With who?" Jake demanded. "What meetings?" Holly looked up at him with an expression of pure panic. "He knows about Tommy Ricci." The name hit Jake like a slap. His casual confidence evaporated instantly, replaced by the trapped look of an animal that had just realized it was cornered. "That's impossible," Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We were careful. We never talked about that anywhere we could be overheard." "Apparently we weren't careful enough," Holly snapped, her panic turning to anger. "Look at this. He has photographs of us meeting with Tommy, dates, times, everything." She flipped to another page, and her face somehow managed to get even paler. "Oh, God. Oh, no, no, no." "What now?" Jake asked, though he looked like he didn't really want to know. "The life insurance policy," Holly said, her voice cracking. "He canceled it yesterday. It's void, all of it." Jake staggered backward as if she had hit him. "What do you mean, canceled?" "I mean there is no life insurance policy anymore." Holly's voice was rising toward hysteria. "Whatever we were planning, whatever Tommy was supposed to do, it's all worthless now." I watched this exchange with a mixture of vindication and disgust. They were confirming everything David had suspected, admitting to plans that would have ended with my death, and their only regret was that they had been caught before they could execute their scheme. Maria, who had been standing nearby with growing alarm, cleared her throat nervously. "Mrs. Holloway, should I leave you alone with these papers?" Holly looked at her as if she had forgotten the poor woman existed. "Yes," she said absently. "Yes, go inside. Don't let anyone else in today." As Maria hurried back toward the house, Jake grabbed Holly's arm. "We need to think about this rationally. If Roger has evidence, if he knows about Tommy, then we need to—" "We need to what?" Holly interrupted. "Run? Where exactly do you think we're going to go? I'm about to lose everything, the house, the savings, all of it. And you—" She turned on him with sudden viciousness. "You don't have anything to contribute. You're a personal trainer who lives in a one-bedroom apartment." Jake's face darkened with anger and wounded pride. "Hey, this whole thing was your idea. You're the one who said your husband was old and boring and probably wouldn't live much longer anyway. You're the one who wanted to speed things up. Lower your voice, Holly hissed, glancing around as if she was afraid of being overheard. But it was too late for discretion. Their carefully constructed fantasy was collapsing in real time, and they were turning on each other like animals fighting over the last scrap of food. I need to call a lawyer, Holly said, her mind clearly racing. If Roger has evidence of an affair, I can still get something in the divorce. Community property laws. Did you not read the papers? Jake interrupted. Look at page 7. Holly flipped through the documents until she found what he was referring to. As she read, her last remaining hope died in her eyes. Pre-nuptial agreement, she read in a hollow voice. Signed in 1987. In the event of adultery, the unfaithful spouse forfeits all claims to marital assets. I remembered that prenup well. We had signed it at Holly's insistence, actually. She had been worried about protecting herself if I ever cheated on her. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. That means... Holly's voice trailed off as the full implications hit her. That means you get nothing, Jake finished brutally, which means we get nothing. They stood there in the wreckage of their plans, surrounded by the luxury that was about to be stripped away from them. The pool, the expensive patio furniture, the landscaped gardens, all of it was going to remain mine, while they walked away with nothing but the memories of their betrayal. Maybe we can work something out, Holly said desperately. Maybe if I go to Roger, if I apologize, if I explain... Explain what? Jake cut her off. That you were planning to have him killed for insurance money? That should go over well. The casual way he said it, planning to have him killed, sent a chill down my spine even though I had known it was coming. Hearing the words spoken aloud by one of the conspirators made the whole nightmare feel more real and more terrible. Holly slumped into a patio chair, the divorce papers scattered around her feet like confetti at the world's worst party. 35 years, she said to no one in particular. 35 years of marriage, and I'm going to walk away with nothing. Well, you'll have me, Jake said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Holly looked up at him with an expression of pure contempt. Will I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're looking pretty eager to distance yourself from this mess. Jake had the grace to look embarrassed, but he didn't deny it. Look, Holly, this changes things. If Roger has evidence about Tommy, if the police get involved, we're both going to prison, Holly said flatly. Is that what you're worried about? Because if it is, you can stop pretending you care about me and just leave now. The mask of devoted lover finally slipped completely from Jake's face, revealing the calculating opportunist underneath. Maybe that would be best, he said slowly. Maybe we both need to think about protecting ourselves. Holly laughed, but there was no humor in it. Protecting ourselves? Right. Well, you don't have much to protect, do you? No assets, no reputation to maintain, no family who will be ashamed when this all comes out. Jake straightened his shoulders, his expression hardening. You know what? You're right, I don't have as much to lose as you do, which means I don't have to stick around and watch you destroy both of us with your poor planning and your sloppy execution. My poor planning? Holly's voice was rising again. You were the one who brought up Tommy Ricci. You were the one who said we needed to be patient and wait for the right opportunity. And you were the one who was too greedy to just settle for a simple divorce, Jake shot back. If you had just left your husband like a normal person, we could have been together without all this drama. They were screaming at each other now, their voices carrying across the neighborhood. In a matter of minutes, they had gone from loving conspirators to bitter enemies, each trying to shift blame for their shared crimes. I had seen enough. I turned and walked back toward the front of the house, leaving them to destroy each other with words since they would no longer have the opportunity to destroy me with actions. As I reached the front gate, I heard Holly call Jake's name one last time, her voice desperate and pleading. But by the time I looked back, Jake was already grabbing his clothes and heading for his truck. The alliance that had threatened my life was crumbling as quickly as it had formed, and I hadn't even had to say a word. I drove home slowly that evening, taking the long route through neighborhoods where families were gathering for dinner, where children played in front yards, where normal people lived normal lives untouched by betrayal and conspiracy. The delivery uniform lay folded on my passenger seat like the costume from a play that had just concluded its final performance. When I pulled into our driveway at 6:30, Jake's red pickup truck was gone, and our house stood silent against the fading daylight. I sat in my car for a moment, savoring the calm before what I knew would be a storm unlike anything our marriage had ever weathered. I found Holly in our living room, still wearing the clothes she had thrown on over her bikini hours earlier. She was sitting on the edge of our couch, divorce papers spread across the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her hands shook as she held a glass of what appeared to be straight whiskey. When she looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, anger, and finally a desperate kind of calculation. "Roger," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of crying or screaming or both. "We need to talk." I set my briefcase down carefully, as if this were any other evening, as if I were just coming home from another ordinary day at the office. "Do we?" Holly stood up unsteadily, the whiskey clearly not her first attempt at dulling the edges of her situation. "Those papers, those accusations, they're not what you think." I almost admired her audacity. Even caught red-handed with evidence that could send her to prison, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative. "What should I think they are, Holly?" She moved closer, her eyes searching my face for some sign of the malleable husband she had been betraying for months. "It's complicated. Jake, he's been pressuring me, making me do things I never would have considered on my own." The lie was so transparent, so insulting to both my intelligence and my dignity, that I felt the last vestiges of love I had carried for this woman finally die. She was going to blame Jake, paint herself as the victim of his manipulation, as if I hadn't read her journal entries celebrating their conspiracy. "Pressuring you to do what?" "Exactly?" I asked. Holly's breathing became more rapid as she realized I wasn't going to make this easy for her. The meetings with those people, the questions about insurance policies, I never wanted any of that, Roger. I was scared of him, scared of what he might do if I didn't go along with his plans. His plans. I let the words hang in the air between us. "Is that what you're calling them now?" Holly nodded eagerly, seizing on what she perceived as an opening. He had this idea that marriages like ours sometimes end naturally, and when they do, the surviving spouse deserves to be taken care of. He made it sound so reasonable, so inevitable. I walked to my chair, the leather recliner where I had spent countless evenings reading while Holly watched television or worked on her laptop, planning God knows what with her young lover. I sat down slowly, watching her face as she tried to gauge my reaction to her performance. "And you found his reasoning compelling," I said. "No." Holly moved closer, desperation making her voice higher, more frantic. "I found it terrifying, but he said he knew people, dangerous people, and if I didn't cooperate, Roger, I was protecting you as much as myself." The revisionist history was breathtaking in its scope. In Holly's new version of events, she had been a reluctant participant in a scheme to murder me in order to protect me from being murdered. The psychological gymnastics required to construct such a narrative would have been impressive if they weren't so insulting. "Where is Jake now?" I asked. Holly's face crumpled. "Gone. The moment he saw those papers, he abandoned me. 30 minutes after you served those documents, he was throwing his things in his truck and driving away." "And you're surprised by this?" "I thought—" Holly's voice broke. "I thought he loved me. I thought we were partners in this, but the second things got difficult, he ran like a coward." I studied my wife's face. This woman who had shared my bed for 35 years, who had promised to love me in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do us part. The irony of that last vow wasn't lost on me. "Holly," I said quietly, "do you understand what's going to happen now?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara further. "I was hoping we could work something out. The prenuptial agreement, surely there's room for negotiation. A marriage this long, there must be some provision for reconciliation. Reconciliation. The word tasted like poison. You want to reconcile our marriage after planning my murder. Holly flinched as if I had struck her. It was never supposed to go that far. It was just talk. Fantasies. People say things when they're angry or frustrated that they don't really mean. People say things, I repeated. Is that what you call meeting with Tommy Ricci? Is that what you call researching the terms of my life? Insurance policy? Just talk? Holly's composure finally cracked completely. She fell to her knees beside my chair, her hands reaching for mine in a gesture that once would have melted my resolve, but now only disgusted me. Please, she whispered. I know I made terrible mistakes. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I can make this right. I looked down at her tear-stained face and felt nothing but cold emptiness. Holly, you hired a man to kill me, so you could inherit my money and run away with your lover. Exactly which part of that do you think counseling can fix? I never hired anyone, she protested. We only talked to Tommy about hypothetical situations. We never paid him anything, never made any concrete plans. Because I discovered your scheme before you could execute it, I finished. The only reason I'm still alive is because you were sloppy, not because you changed your mind. Holly's hands tightened on mine, her fingernails digging into my skin. That's not true. I could never have gone through with something like that. I'm not a murderer, Roger. I'm just a woman who made some very bad choices. Bad choices. I pulled my hands free from her grip. Is that what you call adultery and conspiracy to commit murder? Bad choices? She sat back on her heels, her face streaked with tears and desperation. What do you want from me? What can I possibly say or do to fix this? Nothing, I said simply. There is nothing you can say or do. The marriage is over, Holly. It's been over for months. You just didn't bother to tell me. Holly's breathing became shallow and rapid, panic setting in as she realized that her tears and pleading weren't having their intended effect. The house, she said suddenly. This is my home too. I have rights. Not according to the prenuptial agreement you insisted we sign, I reminded her, and certainly not after what you've done. I'll fight this, she said, her desperation transforming into anger. I'll hire a lawyer. I'll contest the prenup. I'll tell them about your controlling behavior, your emotional abuse. Go ahead, I said calmly. Tell them. And while you're explaining how I emotionally abused you, I'll be sharing David Chen's surveillance footage with the district attorney. Holly went very still. What surveillance footage? The footage of you meeting with Tommy Ricci. The recordings of your conversations about insurance payouts and convenient accidents. The documentation of every hotel room you paid for, every lie you told, every plan you made. The color drained from Holly's face as she realized the true scope of what I had discovered. You hired someone to spy on me? I hired someone to find out the truth, I corrected. And the truth is that you're a would-be murderer who got caught before you could follow through. Holly staggered to her feet, her hand pressed against her chest as if she couldn't breathe. You can't prove intent. Talking to someone isn't the same as hiring them. Maybe not, I agreed. But it's enough to destroy any sympathy a judge might have for your situation, and it's certainly enough to ensure that you leave this marriage with exactly what you brought to it. Nothing. Holly looked around our living room as if seeing it for the first time, cataloging everything she was about to lose. The antique furniture we had collected over decades of marriage, the artwork we had chosen together, the photographs documenting a life that had apparently been a lie for longer than I cared to calculate. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice small and lost. I don't know, I said honestly, and frankly, I don't care. You should have thought about that before you decided to plan my funeral. Holly's phone buzzed with a text message. She looked at it with what appeared to be hope, but as she read the message, her face fell even further. Jake, I asked. She nodded miserably. He says he's staying with friends in another state until this blows over. He says it's too dangerous for us to be in contact right now. So he's abandoned you completely? Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. Holly had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences of those choices alone, just as she had planned for me to face death alone. "You have until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live," I told her. "After that, I'm changing the locks." Holly's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fresh panic. "A week? How am I supposed to find a place to live in a week? I don't have any money, any references." "You have the clothes in your closet and whatever cash you've been hoarding from your affair fund," I said. "That's more than you plan to leave me with." Holly opened her mouth to protest, but seemed to realize that any argument she made would only serve to remind me of exactly what she had planned for my future. Instead, she sank back onto the couch, staring at the divorce papers that had destroyed her life in a single afternoon. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said finally. "It started as just excitement. Jake made me feel young again, desirable. It was supposed to be temporary." "And when did temporary become permanent?" I asked. "When did an affair become conspiracy to commit murder?" Holly was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was so low I almost couldn't hear her. "When I realized that I couldn't go back to being the woman I was before I met him. When I realized that coming home to you every night felt like a prison sentence." The honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. "So you decided to make sure you'd never have to come home to me again." "I decided to explore my options," Holly said, and for a moment her old calculating nature showed through the tears and desperation. "I never committed to anything." "No," I agreed. "You just researched the best ways to kill your husband and collect his life insurance. Completely different things." Holly flinched again, but she didn't deny it. We sat in silence for several minutes, surrounded by the wreckage of 35 years of marriage and the evidence of betrayal that neither of us could take back. Finally, Holly stood up, gathering the divorce papers into an unsteady pile. "I'll need time to find a lawyer." "You have time," I said. "You just don't have money to pay one. Funny how that works out." Holly looked at me with something approaching hatred. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said truthfully. "I'm not enjoying any of this. I'm just relieved to still be alive to see it." 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my house on Maple Street, making coffee for one and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The silence was no longer oppressive. It had become peaceful, comfortable, mine. Holly had moved out within the week, just as I had demanded. She had packed her clothes, her jewelry, and her delusions into a rented van and driven away to start over with nothing but the small nest egg she had managed to hide during our marriage. It wasn't much, maybe $15,000, but it was more than she deserved, and far more than she had planned to leave me with. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Margaret Williams had been as ruthless and efficient as her reputation suggested, and Holly's public defender had been no match for the evidence we presented. The prenuptial agreement held, the adultery was proven beyond doubt, and the conspiracy charges, while never formally filed, had been enough to ensure Holly received nothing from our marital assets. Jake Morrison had never returned to town. According to David Chen's final report, he had moved to Florida and was working as a personal trainer at a resort, presumably looking for his next wealthy, lonely target. I hoped his future victims would be smarter than Holly had been, but I doubted it. Men like Jake thrived on the desperation of people who confused attention with love. Tommy Ricci had been arrested 2 weeks after my divorce papers were served, though not for anything related to me. Apparently, he had been careless with another client, and the police had finally gathered enough evidence to charge him with insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit murder in a different case. I read about it in the newspaper with a mixture of satisfaction and gratitude that I had discovered Holly's plans before Tommy had the chance to demonstrate his professional skills on my behalf. The house felt different now. Lighter, cleaner, honest. I had redecorated the living room, removing the furniture and artwork that reminded me too strongly of the life Holly and I had shared. The bedroom had been completely redone. I couldn't sleep in the same bed where Holly had lain beside me while planning my death, so I had donated everything to charity and started fresh. The pool area, once the scene of Holly's betrayal, had been transformed into something entirely my own. I had the deck refinished, bought new furniture, and installed a small outdoor kitchen. On warm evenings, I cooked dinner and ate outside, reading books I had never had time for during my marriage, listening to music Holly had always complained about, and enjoying the simple pleasure of being alone without being lonely. My retirement had become everything I had hoped it would be before Holly's betrayal had cast a shadow over those dreams. I traveled, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. I had taken a photography class and discovered I had an eye for landscapes. I had learned to cook properly, not just the basic meals I had prepared during the few times Holly was away, but elaborate dishes that I prepared for the simple joy of creation. I had also started volunteering at a local legal aid clinic, helping other people navigate the complexities of divorce and domestic issues. Margaret Williams had recommended me after I mentioned my interest in helping people who found themselves in situations similar to mine. It was rewarding work, and it gave me a way to use my experience for something positive. The phone rang as I was finishing my coffee, interrupting my peaceful morning routine. I glanced at the caller ID and smiled. It was my brother Tom, calling from Arizona, where he had moved after his own retirement. "Good morning, little brother." Tom's voice was warm and familiar through the phone speaker. "Good morning, Tom. How are the grandkids?" "Growing too fast and eating me out of house and home," Tom laughed. "But that's not why I'm calling. I wanted to check in on you. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. How are you doing? Really doing?" It was a question I had been asking myself frequently lately. How was I doing? The honest answer was better than I had expected, better than I probably deserved after the magnitude of the betrayal I had experienced. "I'm doing well," I told Tom. "Better than well, actually. I'm doing things I never thought I'd have the courage to try." "Such as?" I looked around my kitchen, my house, my life that was entirely my own for the first time in decades. "Such as living for myself instead of living for someone who was planning to kill me." Tom was quiet for a moment. He had been one of the few people I had told the complete truth about Holly's conspiracy, and the revelation had shaken him almost as much as it had shaken me. "Any regrets?" he asked finally. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret the 35 years I had spent with Holly? The time that had been genuine, before her resentment and Jake's influence had corrupted everything? Did I regret not seeing the signs earlier, not protecting myself sooner? "I regret that it took me so long to see who she really was," I said finally. "But I don't regret ending it. And I don't regret how I ended it." "Good," Tom said firmly. "What she did to you, what she was planning to do, there's no excuse for that. No amount of marital dissatisfaction justifies conspiracy to commit murder." We talked for another 20 minutes about lighter topics. Tom's garden, my photography, the vacation we were planning to take together in the fall. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen and reflected on how much my life had changed. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock, interrupting my meditation. I opened the door to find David Chen standing on my porch, carrying a small envelope and wearing the satisfied expression of a man who had good news to deliver. "Mr. Holloway," David smiled, extending his hand, "I have something for you." "More evidence?" I asked, though I couldn't imagine what else there was to discover about Holly's betrayal. "Better than evidence," David said, handing me the envelope. "Justice." Inside the envelope was a newspaper clipping from a small town in Florida. The headline read, "Local man arrested in insurance fraud scheme." Below it was a photograph of Jake Morrison being led away in handcuffs. "He tried the same scam with a widow in Tampa," David explained. "Apparently she was smarter than he gave her credit for, and she went to the police when he started asking about her late husband's life insurance policy." I studied Jake's photograph, noting how different he looked in handcuffs compared to the confident, predatory man who had seduced my wife. "How long is he facing?" "With his priors and the conspiracy charges, probably 15 to 20 years. Turns out your wife wasn't his first victim, just his most ambitious project." I folded the newspaper clipping and put it back in the envelope. "And Holly?" David's expression became more serious. She's working as a waitress in a diner about 50 miles south of here. Lives in a studio apartment above a laundromat. No car, takes the bus to work every day. The information should have made me feel vindicated, but instead I felt only a vague sadness. Holly had traded a comfortable life and a husband who loved her for poverty, isolation, and the knowledge that her young lover had been using her just as cynically as she had been using me. "She's asked around about you," David continued. "Apparently she's curious about how you're doing, whether you've sold the house, whether you're dating anyone new." "And what do people tell her?" David smiled. "They tell her you're doing better than you ever did when you were married to her." After David left, I spent the afternoon in my garden, tending to the vegetables I had planted in the spring. Gardening had become one of my unexpected pleasures in this new life. The satisfaction of nurturing something from seed to harvest, of creating beauty and sustenance with my own hands. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the dramatic joy of new love or unexpected windfall, but the quiet contentment of a life lived honestly, of being free from pretense and betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment I wondered if it might be Holly, trying to establish contact after all these months, but when I opened the message it was from someone far more welcome. "Hi, Mr. Holloway, this is Susan from the Legal Aid Clinic. I wanted to thank you for your help with my divorce case. The judge ruled in my favor today. I'm keeping the house and full custody of the kids. I couldn't have done it without your guidance. You saved my life." I read the message twice, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening sun. Susan was a young woman whose husband had been stealing money from their joint accounts to fund an affair, leaving her and their 2 young children in financial jeopardy. I had helped her gather evidence and navigate the legal system, sharing some of the hard-won wisdom from my own experience. I typed back, "Congratulations, Susan. You saved your own life. I just helped you see that you had the strength to do it." As darkness settled over my neighborhood and lights began to twinkle in windows where families were gathering for dinner, I went inside and prepared my own meal. I cooked slowly, methodically, taking pleasure in each step of the process. I set the table with my good china, not saving it for a special occasion, because I had learned that every day you're alive and free is a special occasion. I ate dinner while reading a book about landscape photography, planning the trip I would take next month to photograph the changing leaves in New England. It would be my first autumn as a truly single man in 35 years, and I intended to celebrate it properly. Later that evening, as I prepared for bed in my new bedroom that held no memories of betrayal or conspiracy, I found myself thinking about the moment 6 months ago when I had stood outside my own fence, watching Holly laugh with her lover while they planned my death. That man, the naive, trusting husband who had been so easily deceived, felt like a stranger to me now. I had been forced to rebuild myself from the ground up, to discover who I was when I wasn't trying to please someone who was secretly counting the days until I was dead. The process had been painful, but the result was worth every moment of heartache and humiliation. I was free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, free from the exhausting effort of trying to earn love from someone who was incapable of giving it. Free to be honest, to be myself, to build a life based on truth rather than compromise. As I turned off the lights and settled into sleep, I smiled at the thought that Holly, wherever she was tonight, would never again have the power to hurt me. I had taken that power away from her the day I delivered those divorce papers, and I would never give it to anyone else again. The envelope of truth had set me free, and I intended to stay that way.